It is here, finally, my Canadian Mountain Holidays CMH Revelstoke Heli Skiing Adventure Travelogue. This is my first travelogue. I hope you guys all enjoy. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and how it came about, and then I'm going to talk about each day of the adventure before we close. So, look, first and foremost, if you know me, and I think most of you who are watching this know me to some degree or another, you know that I have a deep passion for travel, especially when it comes to ski travel. I've been really fortunate. Over the years, I've had the ability to ski some of the best snow at the most legendary resorts around the globe. But I've never checked that box on my bucket list that says heli skiing. I've had a ton of friends that have gone and done heli skiing adventures, and everyone has come back and said it was life-changing. 10 years ago, my best friend told me, you've got to do this, you've got to go up with CMH, and it's been on my list. About 6 years ago, plans started getting put in motion, didn't really work out for me at the time, and then 4 years ago, everything lined up. A group of friends was ready, the booking was available, and so we got heli skiing on the calendar for a 4-day trip at Revelstoke in 2024. 2024 was also the year that I turned 40, so it was a big year. We had another trip booked that year as a family to go ski Japan as a family for the first time. I was very excited about that, but as it happens sometimes, Mother Nature did not comply. Just a few days before our heli skiing trip, which was in early February, we got a call on a Sunday night and they said, hey, we're really sorry. There's been rain super high on the snowpack and we can't safely take you up the mountain, so we have to cancel. And at first I thought it was a joke. It's like, where is Ashton Kutcher? Am I being punked? But no, it was real. I got on the horn with my friends. We all felt and shared the same sense of disappointment. But most of us agreed this was a trip that needed to happen. And so we went through the process of figuring out when we could rebook. Unfortunately, these are packages that book out more than a year in advance. So it really didn't make sense to try and fit it into the tail end of that season. We weren't going to be able to get it in 2025. The next real window for us was mid-February 2026. February tends to be a great snow month. We were really optimistic that not only would this trip hit, but it would hit in a big way. So we booked the trip. We booked it for 5 ski days. And if that sounds like a lot, it is. And it's especially a lot when you're going up into heli skiing powder. You got to do a lot more work in a lot of those tree areas especially, and we'll talk about all of that. But 5 days, very excited. And then it was a matter of sitting and waiting for it to come around. And sit and wait we did. And then finally this year, it got in sight. We were in the home stretch. And boy, it didn't look like the weather was going to comply again. All throughout the month of January, we were calling it Junuary. I think for those of you who are on the East Coast, you don't know what I'm talking about. You guys have been hit with a ton of snow and ice and cold weather. That has not been the case on the West Coast. In fact, through the month of January, the West Coast had its worst snowfall on record since 1981 when they started tracking snowfall. So it had been a tough year. And as we were tracking the temperatures up at Revelstoke, man, they were having days where it was in the 50s and 60s at the base of the mountain. At mid-mountain, it was in the 40s. And, about a month out, we were looking at that 10-day forecast, and the temperatures were going up, not down. And we started to get worried, but we all held out faith. And sure enough, as we got close to the trip, the temperatures started plunging, snow was in the forecast, and it was looking like we were going to have pretty good conditions. Boy, were we wrong. We didn't get pretty good conditions. We got optimal conditions, such that one of our guides even said on the third day, she thought that might be one of the best days of heli skiing that they've had in the last 3 years. That's really saying something. So let's talk a little bit about the experience. You fly up to Kelowna, Canada. You stay in a hotel for the night, the 4-Point Sheraton, which is right across the street from the hotel. I should have looked at that on Google Maps because I did get a taxi and I did tell the taxi driver where I was going. And he did look at me quizzically and then drive me around the block and charge me 10 Canadian dollars for the privilege, which, would have been a 3-minute walk. Okay, lesson learned. But you get into Revelstoke, you're supposed to go in and we know now, check in. This was one of the things that maybe wasn't as smooth with the process. I brought 2 pairs of skis because I missed the memo. There was no like know before you go email. And a couple years prior from our previous trip, they had sent an email that said, we've got all the skis in the world. You don't need to bring your own. I brought 2 pairs of skis, hauled them all the way from Bend, got up there, didn't know to check in. One member of our group figured out that we do have to check in that night that you arrive, and then get fitted for skis and all that stuff. Well, I had my own skis. I got checked in. Everybody else was faced with a notebook to figure out on paper what skis they wanted, which maybe isn't ideal, and we'll talk about that. But everybody got checked in. I had an early arrival, and one person had arrived before me. It was my buddy G, and we are really good friends, but we live on opposite ends of the country, so we don't get to see each other that much anymore. I was so thrilled that he was in the hotel before I even arrived because we had multiple hours until everybody got to town. We took that time to go up to Knox Mountain Park in downtown Kelowna. It overlooks Okanagan Lake. It was absolutely stunning. Short hike, but a worthwhile hike if you're ever finding yourself in Kelowna with a little bit of time to spare. From there, we decided to walk down to the Wildlings wine bar. Neither one of us drink really these days, at least not much for Graham, and I don't drink at all. So we weren't there for the wine. We were there for the small plates, and they were exquisite. A huge shout out to the Wildlings wine bar. We had pork belly, we had tartare, we had scallops. I can't remember everything else that we had, but everything that I put into my mouth was absolutely fantastic. And if you go to Kelowna, you shouldn't spend a night there without hitting up the Wildling wine bar in downtown Kelowna. From there, we went back to the hotel, caught an Uber back to the hotel. Thank you, Uber. You are making life so much easier in so many cities where, in the past, getting around was a lot harder. Big cities, always kind of easy to get around. Cities like Kelowna, maybe not as much, but with Uber, you can get anywhere whenever you want. This is not a paid advertisement. I just appreciate it. We got back to the hotel, and then my buddies, D and his wife, Kay, showed up, and we went to a second dinner at a little kind of strip mall sushi joint across the street from the hotel. And I will say, it was pretty darn good. It was like 7 out of 10 sushi, but it was better than I expected from being in a strip mall. And the best part was the price to value ratio was off the charts. I got spicy tuna rolls that were, I think, like 8 pieces per roll for $7.50. Yes, that's my go-to. Yes, I eat real nigiri and real sashimi, but this was second dinner. So I was having some edamame and some tuna rolls and not overstuffing myself. And the whole thing came to like 20 Canadian bucks, with which the exchange is not that much money. So, huge credit to the sushi place across the street. I had a great conversation with D and K, catching up about our kids and life and everything that we needed to catch up on before this whole trip really started. And then it was back to the hotel to crash out, because day one is an early start. You got to be outside the hotel with your bags ready at 5 a.m. because that bus leaves for Revelstoke at 5:30 sharp. Now, fortunately, it's about a 2-hour and 20-minute ride from Kelowna to Revelstoke. So you got plenty of time to sleep on the bus. They wake you up in the last 30 minutes, and then we watch the first of a couple of different safety videos. And safety is important. You know it going in, but I think coming out of the experience, I am more deeply appreciative of all of the safety training that took place than I ever could have been before, because it's dangerous being up on the mountain. And I think we were unfortunately reminded of that. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that just as we were getting back from this trip, a tragedy was taking place in Tahoe, where 9 skiers and guides were unfortunately lost to the most catastrophic avalanche in over 40 years. Backcountry skiing, whether you are doing it from a highway into a backcountry area, whether you're doing it from a helicopter, it's incredibly dangerous. You put your life in the hands of your guides, and if everything goes well, it's a magical experience. And we'll talk about that. For me, it was life-changing, and I don't say that lightly. But you have to know every step of the way that it's dangerous. You have to follow every instruction and make sure that every protocol is followed, so everybody can be safe and have the time of their lives. And we had that. So as we are getting ready on day one, we get into Revelstoke, we get off the bus, we go into another safety briefing. And after that, they've got a bunch of breakfast for us. We get checked into the hotel. Everybody stays at the Regent Hotel. It's part of your package. At the Regent Hotel is like a landmark institution in Revelstoke. It is absolutely beautiful. The rooms are incredibly well appointed. I want to give a special shout out to the water pressure, because water pressure is key, especially when you're coming off a cold day on the mountain. But it's not just the rooms. There's a beautiful outdoor hot tub. There's a fully fitted gym and a sauna that can fit a bunch of people. We used all of the amenities while we were there. They also provide on-site massage services, and there is a terrific restaurant called the 112 that pretty much everybody in Revelstoke visits. There's a small bar, the Riverside Bar, the River City Pub is what it's called. And they've got great food, great drinks. It's a great atmosphere, especially while we were there with the Winter Olympics going on. The Olympics were on every screen. People had a great vibe. It was just a really fun place to be when we weren't on the mountain. So we get checked in, and then we go get fitted for our first day on the mountain. And I went up in my powder skis, so my Black Crows, and this ended up being a mistake because my big Black Crows are 116 underfoot, which was actually a great size and length for our first day in the Alpine. It was a half day, but it sure felt like a full day. Unfortunately, though, my backcountry bindings held up the first couple days, but not the last couple of days, and froze actually on day 4, compelling me to go switch to a different pair of skis, which we'll talk about when we get to day 5. But anyways, we get up on the mountain, we get into the helicopter for the first time that takes us from kind of base operations all the way up to the mountain after we've done our avalanche training on site. I'm getting this all out of order, so let me back up a little bit. They take us in a van to our avalanche training site where the helicopter also picks us up. We do our avalanche training, understanding how to find somebody with your receiver, your probe, your shovel, and then how to dig them out if you need to. That is really, really important training. Fortunately, we didn't have to dig anybody out of an avalanche, but those shovels did come out a couple of times to get people free from really deep powder. So very important training. And then from there, we went over to a helicopter pickup point. There are a few of them down near base operations. The helicopter came in, and Steve is the helicopter pilot. And as you'll see from the videos, Steve is one of the most incredibly talented pilots I have ever seen with my own 2 eyes. He flies that thing like he stole it, but he is always in full command of that helicopter, and he knows the mountain like the back of his hand. So Steve drops in, fuels up, and then picks up from 100 feet away and drops right on top of us. And away we go up into the upper Alpines where we have a bluebird day, wide open glades to ski. It was just incredible. And it was our group plus one guy that we picked up that we essentially adopted for the week. Our buddy Jay from Shanghai, a Chinese software developer, really incredible guy, dad to a 16-year-old. We just vibed on so many levels. And I think this is one of the most powerful parts of trips like this. You know, we had 8 people in our group. Jay made 9. There were some days where they would add a 10th, oftentimes a hotel employee who was sneaking in for a day on the mountain, which I thought was one of the coolest perks you could have working at any hotel or any establishment. But we became a bit of a family, and we really bonded that entire trip. And Jay also was clutch because I brought my Insta360 camera. And as you'll see in the video montage that I'll be posting alongside this on YouTube, I got a lot of really incredible video footage, but I got that video footage thanks to the selfie stick that Jay brought on the trip that I forgot. I meant to bring the selfie stick and didn't, and I thought I was okay because I had a chest harness. One, you can't wear a chest harness with a transmitter. Otherwise, they're not going to find you if you get caught in an avalanche. That's a big no-no. And so the chest harness went back in the bag. 2, I learned after going through this that the chest harness was only going to capture what was in front of me anyway. So, silver lining is that we used the selfie stick, and after the first day figured out how it articulated and got it up higher so that we could capture better video. But truly, none of the video that we captured would have been there, and much less if we had gotten video would have been to the same quality and depth that it is, if not for Jay and bringing that stinking selfie stick. So thank you again, Jay. I can't wait to see you again in Japan. All right, So day one, we're with our guide, Lily. Lily is the head guide for all of the guides at CMH Revelstoke. She's French-Canadian, and she's been guiding for 26 years. She was an incredible day one guide. So patient, so kind, funny, teaching us things about the mountain every time we stopped between stretches. And I have to say, she's one of the most graceful skiers I've ever seen. Now, every single guide is an incredibly talented skier. And maybe there was a little day one bias there, but watching Lily ski, and if you look at the day one video, the one video I got, that's Lily. And I should have done a better job staying behind Lily. If you go up there, know that they do not want you in front of them for very, very good reasons. And I got much better about that after day one. But do check out that video and just take in how graceful her skiing is. It was something to behold. Okay, so we got a bunch of runs in on day one. It was a ton of fun. And then all of a sudden the sun started coming down and it was time to go. So we get back on the helicopter, fly back down to base camp, and off we are in the van back to the hotel for our welcome dinner. Our welcome dinner was incredible. They held it in the banquet room. It was a buffet, so delicious. And this is something I'm going to talk about a lot. The food was on point from the first moment to the last moment. So day one dinner was really great. We met a number of different people. There were 4 different groups and actually a private group as well. So there were about 40 people that were staying at the hotel on that trip that week. And we met so many new friends along the way, including 84-year-old Jack Johnson, who was up there for his 50th year of heli-skiing with over 9 million vertical feet logged. Talk about a true legend, a member of the CMH Hall of Fame. It was so cool hearing a lot of those stories, chatting with the private group of guys that had come up, many, many years ago, starting in 1984, adding people to their group from 1984 to 1998. And then it's been the same group every year that comes up since 1998. And they go ski all different terrain. They go to different parts of northern BC. And I just thought to myself, that's where I want to be 25 years from now. Sitting in the hot tub, reminiscing on not just the day you had, but all of the days that you've had in the past. It was really cool. But it was an early night because we were all exhausted and the second day was set to be an early start. There are 4 groups. You cycle through group numbers every day. Day 1, we were group 4. Day 2, we were group 1, and that meant that we had stretching at 6:30. Huge thanks to the stretching team. Man, I can't remember her name, but we had a host every single day, and she basically took us through yoga and stretching, but put it in layman's terms so everybody knew where they had to move their body to get the best stretch and be ready for another full day on the mountain. So stretching was at 6:30. Then we had our breakfast at 7. Breakfast was great every single day, full spread, different types of eggs, different proteins, unsweetened yogurt, which I really appreciated, with granola and berries, hard-boiled eggs. You could really pack the protein without the filler if you wanted to. But if you wanted the filler, they had incredible pancakes. They had all kinds of great stuff for people to eat. There was not a single day that anybody came back to the table without a full plate. And that's really saying something when you're catering to people from all over the world. And you're trying to make sure that everybody is really ready for the mountain. So great breakfast. Day 2, we get up a little bit late because there's a fog that set in the morning and there's a storm that's coming in. We knew that. This is let's see. This is Thursday. Thursday, day 1, Friday, day 2, Saturday, day 3, Sunday. So this is Friday. Friday, February 13th. That's right, Friday the 13th. And actually, as I think about it, the fog was very appropriate for Friday the 13th. We couldn't go back up into the Alpines because the fog just hung up there. And Steve, the helicopter pilot, wasn't comfortable going up there. And when Steve says he's not going somewhere, we don't go there. So we spent our day down in the trees. It was our first tree day with our guide, Brad. Brad is also an incredible skier. He makes it look effortless. The way that he powers through turns and accelerates just shocked me. And at one point I asked Brad, like, how much are you holding back? We're doing a pretty good job keeping up. I was on his heels most of the time, and he just laughed. And that's all I needed to know. Like, as a golfer, I'm a 10 handicap. I can look at players at my club who are a scratch golfer and know that they are great golfers, but they are miles behind where the pros are. And that's what that moment meant to me. Brad's a pro. He's not just an excellent skier. He's a freaking pro. and he kept us safe. He took us through a ton of great runs. We started with a run called High Roller. We actually finished with the same run. And boy, on day 2, after having kind of gained our bearings on day 1, I think we all did feel like high rollers, at least from a skiing perspective, not necessarily a wealth perspective, but it didn't feel like it could get better than that. Only it did. Now, on day 2, we lapped a run called Pollock several times. It was about 1,950 vertical feet, so a lot of vert. Definitely burns the legs, and when you get back down to that helicopter, it swoops you up. Your legs get a few minutes to recharge. And one of the very cool things in the helicopter is they have all these little bottles of water and Gatorade. So every time you're going up, you can chug one of these little bottles, get it down. We put them all in the little disposal bin, and then we're all ready to pour out of the helicopter. Wait for the helicopter to leave. As you'll see from the video, it's quite the experience. And then we get up, we strap back in, and then we go back on our next run. So we started with High Roller. We lapped Pollock several times because we kept finding new lines to ski. It was really fun. And then we went over to Caribou Ridge, where our lunch was served for the second day. And I should mention that the hotel has this incredible woman named Lucia. I was told she's an older Italian woman that does all of the soups for the hotel. And boy, the first day, the soup was a tomato bisque, and I missed it. I love a tomato bisque, but I wasn't feeling that hungry. I was just so excited to get up and start skiing that I skipped the soup. That was a mistake. Several people who had every soup said that was the best of the bunch. So I regret missing that soup, but I did not miss the soup at any point thereafter. And on day 2, we had perhaps the best soup of the daytime soups. You also got a bunch of sandwiches. The sandwiches were good. They were nothing to write home about, but they were all more than edible. You'd power down a sandwich, get a bunch of protein, and then hit the soup. And on day 2, it was a butternut squash soup that was to die for. I absolutely loved it. 10 out of 10. Great job, Lucia. In addition to Brad, as we got back to skiing, we also picked up Sam. And so Sam was the second guide that would attach to different groups throughout the week. And Sam was also a male model. He will hate me for saying this, but a very dashing gentleman. He puts Derek Zoolander to shame. And at one point, they tried to make him into a male model for Revelstoke, the mountain resort, and he was not having that. So unfortunately, all of those photos have been lost to the ether. We're still going to try and find them. Once it's out there, it's out there. We're going to find those photos, Sam. But Sam was an incredible second guide, serving as the caboose. Because as you can imagine, with 10 people in a group, or I think we had 9 on day 2, some people are faster, some people are slower, and everybody needs to be able to ski at their pace. So having a second guide that's serving as the caboose is really helpful. Not necessary, but really helpful. We don't have to stop quite as often. So we had a great second half of the day, finishing again with Caribou Ridge and High Roller. And then we came back to the hotel for our first night's dinner at the 112 restaurant. The 112 restaurant is a fine dining establishment within the Regent Hotel. And I'll tell you, before we ever even sat down, and we had a set menu, which was really great. That was all included in the price. But then we could also order off the regular menu a la carte if we wanted to. We had 2 different servers hype up the duck confit spring rolls to the point where these servers talked about banquets where these would be ordered and they would express a willingness to essentially dumpster dive to get whatever's left after these banquet dinners are over. So the hype bar, set very, very high for these duck confit spring rolls. And fortunately, in our first night in the 112 restaurant, what was on the menu for our appetizer but the duck confit spring rolls? And I gotta say, they delivered. They were perhaps the best spring roll I've ever had. Huge congratulations to the 112 restaurant. You have a feature item there, and fortunately for you, your employees are doing a great job evangelizing it. It was a great dinner overall, and then I had to tap out a little bit early because I was just exhausted. Of course, as soon as I got back to my room, I started diving into the day 2 video capture and photos. I ended up staying up way too late and then finally realizing I have to go to bed because we are skiing again in a number of hours. So I crashed out. I woke up. My Oura Ring yelled at me and said I didn't sleep long enough or well enough, but my readiness was high and it was right. It was day 3, Valentine's Day, talked with the family, expressed my love, And then I got to spend Valentine's Day with our group and Troy, our first of 2 days with Troy, who was one of the most incredible guides, one of the most incredible guys I've ever met. And not only was Troy awesome, it also ended up being the best ski day of my life. Now, we had an argument about this. How do you decide which day is the best ski day of your life? And so I said, well, look, if I had a magic wand and a friend of mine was going up for one heli-skiing day and I could wave my magic wand and give them one day on this trip, which one would I give them? And for me, without question, it was day 3. It was the deepest powder I had ever skied in my entire life. It was the best tree skiing I had ever skied, even as a very passionate tree skier. Coming into the day, they were forecasting 10 to 15 centimeters, so about 7 inches of snow. The hope was that they would get about 20 centimeters or 8 to 10 inches of snow. But they got 35 centimeters, 18 inches, and it snowed steadily all day long. It did make for a little bit of a messy goggle situation for several of us because deep powder plus consistent snow plus crashes means snow in your goggles, snow in your vents, and once it's in there, it ain't that easy to get it out. I made the mistake of leaving my extra pair of goggles in my bag back at the hotel on day 2. Didn't make that mistake on day 3 or 4 or 5, but didn't need them either. So better to have them and need them than, or better to have them and not need them than not have them and need them in this case. So anyways, we got going on the mountain, and unfortunately before the day could really get underway, it started on a bit of a sour note. Deep powder is tough, and if you make a wrong turn, you can dive into a powder glade that is much deeper than you realize, and if you go down, oftentimes the powder will grab your skis and twist you, and that can be really painful. And unfortunately, one member of our group had that happen on the very first run on one of the very first turns and had to be evac'd off the mountain. Now, we were fearing the worst. Fortunately, it ended up being a torn meniscus, which is something that he's already working on dealing with. We are all definitely pulling for him for it to get better, so he's ready to get back on the mountain soon. But that is just one of the risks of backcountry skiing, especially when you're skiing in deep powder. Now, we had to press on, and press on we did, and boy, were we rewarded for it. We didn't have as many runs on day 3 as we had on day 2 or day 4 or day 5, but every single run was at least 2,100 vertical feet or longer in deep powder. We're talking about chest high powder at some points. And if you don't believe me, wait for that YouTube montage and you're going to see some still images of chest high powder. It was absolutely incredible. We spent the day skiing Stump Farm, Psycho Moose, Sicko Moose, and Dancing Bear. I love the run names. I think, it's like playing great golf courses. There's something to the name that just gives more power to the experience. And for all the names of runs that we skied, these were some of my favorite run names on day 3. And it was fitting that day 3 was also my favorite day of the trip. Okay, so we get to lunch after skiing a bunch of deep powder, as you'll see in the videos, and it's broccoli soup day. Not quite as good as butternut squash, but we are splitting hairs here. It is a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10 type soup. More sandwiches, and we were ready to go to ski the second half of the day. Now, because it was a little bit more overcast and the snow was in, we finished the day about 2 o'clock, got back to the helicopter, and came back down to the mountain where I got a massage from the on-site massage therapist. It was an absolutely fantastic deep tissue massage. And I'll tell you, 5 days of skiing in a row is a lot, even for somebody who skis a lot. And unfortunately, this year, without a lot of snowfall in the West, I didn't really get a chance to build my ski fitness. My normal fitness is fine, but ski fitness is a different beast entirely. So going and getting that massage at the end of day 3 was clutch beyond clutch. Huge thank you to Nikki. It was a great massage, great conversation, great space, 10 out of 10 experience. And that sent me into our Valentine's dinner feeling ready to go for a great dinner and then a great sleep, and more importantly, a great day 4. The Valentine's dinner was once again terrific, especially the prime rib, the scallops, and the potatoes au gratin. Those are the 3 things that jumped out at me. But like with every meal they served, there was so much food on the table. There was something for everybody, and everybody walked away full and happy. All right. So after day 3, we went back up into the Alpine on day 4. The weather complied. It was another bluebird day. Some of the most stunning videos and photos that we have, to be totally honest. It's hard not to love those photos and videos. It was a very different ski experience. You're skiing wide open alpine glades. You're hitting some wind-blown rollers, which I absolutely love. They're like little baby kickers that send you in the air a few feet, allow you to get that sensation of touching your skis down in the powder and gliding out of it. And glide we did. Actually, one of the runs that we lapped several times was called Glider. Our guide Natalie took us up and down that run, and every single time Natalie found us clean lines. We weren't skiing through anybody else's tracks. And when somebody says skiing can feel like butter or it can feel like flying, that's what it felt like out there. It was absolutely incredible. So thank you, Natalie, for a great day 4. We had a great time on Glider in the morning. We got to lunch, had a chicken soup without the chicken. That was 10 out of 10 fantastic. Lucia knocking it out of the park again. And then we were back on the mountain. In the afternoon, we were skiing runs that were about 2 times longer than the runs we skied in the morning. So just from morning to afternoon, it was a very different experience. We were skiing Armstrong, we were skiing Quickie, and we were skiing Blanket Pass. I actually have a high fidelity image of a poster that I bought that shows the Revelstoke skiing territory with all of the runs on it. So I will try and get that in a good frame so that if you guys want, you can see that map and you can actually kind of make a connection between the runs that I'm talking about and where they are on the mountain. Anyways, day 4 was, for me, perhaps the second best day of the trip, maybe the third best. It was the best bluebird day, not even close. And it was absolutely magical. And that was the day that we were arguing about, because day 5 was much more like day 3. And we'll get to that in a second. But day 3 was better than day 5. So the question was, if you were going to give somebody 2 very different experiences, do you give them the Alpine Bluebird day or do you give them the Deep Powder Tree Skiing day? And again, for me, the Deep Powder comes first, and we'll rank all of these at the very end. But that Alpine day was absolutely incredible. And after we finished up, we came back down the mountain. We were back at the 112 hotel with another set menu, and they served us a broccoli soup to start. That was out of this world. I know I'm running out of adjectives for the soup, and it's warranted. I promise you it's warranted. So it was so good that I actually asked the server for a second bowl of soup. And when I asked the server for a second bowl of soup, only one person at the table noticed. But when it showed up, everybody noticed and gave me a pretty hard time. But you know what? I don't care, because it was that good. I ate that second bowl of soup, and I thought about asking for a third bowl of soup, which actually finally felt excessive. So I didn't do that. But the rest of the meal was excellent. I had a great pork tenderloin dish with a risotto that was absolutely beautiful. Great job. Risotto's not that easy to get right, and oftentimes you will be surprised at a fine dining establishment that doesn't, but it's not easy, and they did a great job. So another big round of applause for the 112 restaurant. Normally, groups who are there for a 5-day trip will have 3 nights in the 112. Our Valentine's dinner was back in the banquet hall because, they gotta fill up those tables with all of the couples in Revelstoke that want to come and have a Valentine's dinner. I don't begrudge them that. And, again, overall, there wasn't a meal that wasn't absolutely excellent. Now, I will say, on day 4, we did order the fried goat cheese off of the a la carte menu. And the fried goat cheese was 34 Canadian dollars per plate. We ordered 2. And I was thinking that we would get a couple pieces of fried goat cheese, but each plate only came with 1 piece of fried goat cheese. Now, we cut it into quarters. We made it work for the group. It was absolutely excellent. I make fried goat cheese myself, and I think of myself as a bit of a goat cheese connoisseur. It was terrific. But I think at 34 Canadian dollars, you should get 2 pieces of fried goat cheese, not 1, or it needs to be bigger so that it's more easily shared. Just a little bit of feedback. I also finished the night with a creme brulee. Don't eat dessert that often these days, but if there's creme brulee on the menu, you can almost always bet I'm gonna try it. It was a great creme brulee. It was a really good creme brulee. It was like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10. That's good enough for me. If it's a 7 or a higher, I would order it again. I would order this one again, and I would recommend it to a friend. So, creme brulee was great. Went back to the hotel room. Did more video editing, crashed out, and called it a night, getting ready for our last day of the trip, day 5. We were back with Troy. Sam was with us almost all day. And in terms of conditions, the powder wasn't quite as deep. There was great visibility where we were. We were kind of, below the alpine, but above where we had been tree skiing before. And there was a light snow that was falling all day. So we did a bunch of tree skiing. It was a very different type of tree skiing than we tree skied on day 3. The trees were a bit more wide open. And I would say that, the trees led us into a number of glades that we hadn't been able to touch before. So there was a lot less work. We would do work to get through some trees, and then we'd have these wide open glades to make big turns, to hit different kickers and ledges, and, just choose your own adventure, truly. That was day 5. We actually also got to ski through an area of burned out trees. And I don't know if that was a wildfire or if it was an intentional burn to help repopulate. But that was cool. And you'll see one of the videos in there where the trees are all burnt out. And I don't really think the video does justice to the lived experience of being in those burned trees and then flowing into different areas of the mountain. So that was really incredible. On day 5, we had lunch down as a group. Once again, it was a bean soup. I would give this one a 7 out of 10. I did like that you're drinking out of a cup, so I would get through all the broth, and then there was a bunch of beans at the bottom. And I did ask for seconds of the bean soup. I asked for seconds, I think, every single day. But the bean soup of them was my least favorite. So if we're stacking them all up, my favorite soup was the butternut squash. My second favorite soup was the chicken soup. My third favorite soup was the broccoli soup. My fourth favorite soup was the bean soup. And I didn't get to try the tomato bisque, which was a shame, a real shame. So we skied our butts off on day 5. And by the end of the day, we were all absolutely toast. Legs burning, hearts full of joy, core memories made. We got back on the helicopter for our last flight down the mountain. You'll see our last run. I captured all of our last run into different segments that are in the montage video. It was just an absolutely magical experience. All of the vistas that we saw, the power of being on the mountain. For me, the mountain is my happy place. I think it's important that everybody has a happy place where you feel like you can go and recharge. And of course, there's the paradox of, my happy place is also a place where there are inherent dangers, but it's hard to explain how spiritually refreshing it is to be in an environment like that around people that you care about deeply, with new friends, with great guides, and just over-delivering on expectations. My expectations were so high, I believed that they could be met, but I didn't know how they could be exceeded. And the skiing and the lodging experience was absolutely excellent. We got to departure day, our last night there. We had another great dinner. Our farewell dinner was fantastic. Another great spread. We congratulated everybody for finishing the trip. We did rounds of applause for all of the incredible folks who make the trip happen. From Max, who does comms, to Steve, the helicopter pilot, to the helicopter mechanic, whose name is escaping me right now, but he's just as important as Steve, to the hotel managers who make everything flow so smoothly. It is a village that makes this possible, and an incredible life-changing experience that they delivered to us. And with that, our first Uncle Denny travelogue is complete. But don't worry, another is right around the corner as I head to Japan tomorrow with one of my best friends for a week of skiing, incredible food, and a lot more fun. Until then, friends.